Welcome to a battlefield of minds. Two grandmasters face off where every move cuts like a sword, one mistake, and it's over. This isn't just chess, it's war disguised as strategy. Let's dive in, move by move, into this epic clash. Giulio opens with e4, pushing his central pawn like the first spear of war, claiming space and signaling that he intends to challenge Wesley from the very first moments. Wesley responds with f5, calmly mirroring the central claim, while planting a solid shield in the heart of the board, ready to meet whatever aggressive plans Giulio has prepared. Giulio develops his knight to f3, activating a key piece toward the center and immediately putting soft pressure on the f5 pawn, testing Wesley's defensive readiness. Wesley counters with n6, reinforcing his control over the center while challenging Giulio's future plans, building a flexible and dynamic structure for the coming battle. Giulio brings his bishop to b5, pinning the knight on c6, introducing early tension, forcing Wesley to think carefully about how to untangle his queenside development. Wesley develops nf6, striking back at the center and adding fuel to the growing tension, creating a balanced yet dangerous structure where any misstep could shift momentum. Giulio supports his center with d3, showing calm strategic discipline as he builds a stable foundation rather than jumping into premature aggression. Wesley places his bishop on c5, aiming directly at Giulio's kingside and positioning himself for rapid castling, injecting heat into the opening skirmish. Giulio decides to capture on c6 with bx6, doubling Wesley's pawns and trying to distort the black structure, suggesting he wants long-term positional pressure. Wesley recaptures with dx's, opening the d-file and accepting structural damage in exchange for activity, transforming the center into a sharp battleground. Giulio develops his bishop to e3, calmly improving coordination while eyeing c5 and preparing potential pressure against Wesley's expanded pawn structure. Wesley responds with bd6, centralizing the bishop to fortify the dark squares and brace for Giulio's growing build-up before the mid game erupts. Giulio plays h3, preventing any annoying pins from Wesley's minor pieces, and subtly preparing a comfortable kingside structure for his upcoming castling. Wesley castles kingside, rushing his king to safety and declaring that the real fight for the center and initiative is now officially underway. Giulio follows with 0-0, placing his king behind sturdy defenses and aligning his rook on the f-file, completing development before launching deeper plans. Wesley activates re8, positioning the rook on a powerful central file and hinting at future pawn breaks or tactical ideas involving f5 and f4. Giulio brings nbd2 into play, improving coordination among his knights while preparing potential central advances or rerouting toward more aggressive squares. Wesley responds with n7, rearranging his knight to support future pawn thrusts and tightening the defensive net around his central structure. Giulio pushes d4, striking at the heart of the position and trying to open lines for his active bishops, signaling his desire to seize the initiative. Wesley captures with xp4, refusing to let Giulio take over the center and forcing immediate tension, opening lanes where tactics can soon appear. Giulio recaptures with bxt4, restoring central presence and eyeing Wesley's kingside, setting the stage for a far more tactical battle ahead. Wesley plays and fight, retreating with purpose to reroute the knight toward more useful defensive or attacking squares, tightening control over key lines. Giulio places his rook on a-oni, strengthening central control and connecting his heavy pieces, ready to challenge Wesley's rook on the same contested file. Wesley pushes c5, aggressively challenging Giulio's bishop and the d4 outpost, trying to destabilize White's central harmony and swing the momentum. Giulio retreats to c3 with his bishop, repositioning to a more flexible diagonal while maintaining pressure and staying alert for future tactical shots. Wesley pushes b5, expanding on the queen side with force and gaining space, signaling that Giulio must respond before Black's pawns roll too far. Giulio plays b3, fortifying the queenside structure and preparing to re-anchor his bishop, ensuring Wesley's advance doesn't overrun his defenses. Wesley develops b7, placing the bishop on a long, powerful diagonal aimed deep into Giulio's territory, hinting at explosive future tactics. Giulio strikes with e5, boldly challenging the center and trying to break Wesley's coordination, pushing the game into sharper and riskier territory. Wesley replies with b7, calmly stepping aside while reinforcing his structure, signaling that he's ready for the center to explode on his terms. Giulio plays qa2, centralizing his queen while preparing potential kingside pressure, keeping Wesley guessing about where the next blow will land. Wesley pushes b4, attacking the knight and aggressively gaining space, forcing Giulio to react as the queenside becomes a storm of advancing pawns. Giulio retreats his bishop to b2, taking aim along the long diagonal and preparing to counter Wesley's expanding pawn wedge with patient precision. Wesley jumps in with n6, reactivating the knight with menace and eyeing central squares, creating new tactical threats Giulio must respect. Giulio plays qa3, aligning queen and bishop toward kingside possibilities while watching over central weaknesses, adding fresh layers to his pressure. Wesley answers with qd5, stepping forward boldly, centralizing the queen, and targeting multiple weaknesses at once, escalating tension across the board. Giulio brings his queen to a foul, offering trades while pointing directly at the kingside, trying to lower the tactical heat and regain stable footing. Wesley advances a5, pushing his queenside initiative with determination, preparing to pry open lines and stretch Giulio's defenses even thinner. Giulio plays qg4, shifting the queen aggressively toward Wesley's king, threatening dangerous ideas and injecting new urgency into the unfolding fight. Wesley responds with red8, doubling pressure on the central files and preparing his rooks for a decisive showdown as the middle game fully ignites. Giulio leaps with n4, aiming his knight deep into the center, as he pressures Wesley's structure and hints at brewing kingside complications that could erupt at any moment. Wesley calmly plays kite, tucking his king into a safer corner and removing it from potential tactical shots, preparing to weather Giulio's growing central pressure. Giulio advances with nd3, redeploying his knight toward dangerous kingside squares, sharpening threats and signaling that he's ready to escalate the fight. Wesley counters with b5, retreating his bishop to reinforce the kingside and anchor his defensive formation as tensions climb on multiple fronts. Giulio pushes h4, storming forward on the kingside with fiery intent, preparing to pry open lines around Wesley's castled king in search of a breakthrough. Wesley strikes back with a foul, driving his queenside pawn like a battering ram to destabilize Giulio's structure and open the door for his heavy pieces. Giulio brings Rabone, reinforcing the queenside with precision and preparing his rook for defensive duties while keeping future counterplay options alive. Wesley responds with KCEs, centralizing his queen and unleashing pressure across multiple files, creating threats that stretch Giulio's defenses dangerously thin. Giulio pushes Hive, continuing his kingside assault with relentless energy, hoping to crack open Black's shelter before Wesley's queenside avalanche becomes overwhelming. Wesley plays RD2, planting the rook deep in enemy territory where it slashes at White's position and amplifies the pressure on Giulio's overcrowded defenses. Giulio fires back with G5, bringing his queen aggressively into the fray, targeting weaknesses and trying to slow Wesley's expanding initiative. Wesley reinforces with RD7, stacking his rooks and preparing to dominate the central files, tightening the noose around Giulio's struggling camp. Giulio plays RB Dawn, doubling his rooks to challenge the intrusion, attempting to push Wesley's aggressive pieces out of his territory before collapse. Wesley captures with RX Dawn, simplifying the tension while maintaining control, forcing Giulio to respond to the sudden shift in material balance. Giulio recaptures RX Dawn, keeping the central file contested and refusing to let Wesley's rooks seize full command despite mounting pressure. Wesley shifts to K8, stepping his king into a more coordinated position, hinting that he's preparing for decisive central or queenside breakthroughs. Giulio counters with QG4, returning to kingside aggression and renewing threats as he tries to keep Wesley's king from slipping into total safety. Wesley advances XB3, blasting open the queenside structure and creating a dangerous passed pawn that forces Giulio onto the defensive immediately. Giulio recaptures XB3, stabilizing the flank but acknowledging that Wesley's attack has torn open critical lines that now need urgent attention. Wesley invades with Rat2, plunging the rook deep into Giulio's position, threatening discoveries and unleashing immense pressure on the weakened White camp. Giulio plays Arbonne, trying to shield his vulnerable B-pawn area while bracing for the heavy artillery that Wesley continues to bring closer. Wesley responds with K6, aligning queen and rook for a potential crushing combination, signaling Giulio must defend flawlessly or fall quickly. Giulio retreats with K2, stepping aside from tactical threats on the G-file and preparing his king for survival as the storm intensifies. Wesley plays K6, recentralizing his queen and renewing threats on multiple fronts, tightening his grip on the collapsing White position. Giulio jumps to NH4, seeking counterplay on weakened kingside squares and hoping to create tactical motifs that might disrupt Wesley's momentum. Wesley answers with QD5, centralizing once more with dominating presence, pointing at White's weaknesses and preparing the final assault. Giulio pushes forward, launching a desperate counteroffensive in the center, trying to drive Wesley's queen away and reopen possibilities for resistance. Wesley calmly places B7, reinforcing key squares and preparing to unleash tactical blows once Giulio's center inevitably crumbles. Giulio activates NF5, bringing both knights into the heart of the battle as he searches for complications that might slow Wesley's deadly control. Wesley slashes with BXH4, eliminating a key defender and cracking open White's kingside, increasing the pressure to nearly unbearable levels. Julio recaptures with NH4, trying to keep material balance and maintain some control, but the structural damage is already beginning to show. Wesley strikes with Q4, infiltrating Julio's position with a dominating queen, threatening multiple weaknesses and preparing to harvest pawns. Julio retreats with Nf5, placing the knight on an active square as he hopes to block threats and buy time against Wesley's aggressive queen. Wesley captures Qxet2, scooping a pawn while keeping Julio's king exposed, turning the endgame into a looming disaster for white. Julio plays Ardouin, bringing his rook to challenge black's active pieces and try to build what little counterplay remains before the final collapse. Wesley responds with Qec2, delivering a forcing check that tears open Julio's kingside and brings black's pieces storming toward the white king. Julio is forced to capture with Qxec2, trading queens in hopes of reducing the immediate danger, even though the position remains grim. Wesley answers with Bxc2, recapturing and emerging with a deadly bishop deep inside Julio's camp, leaving white's remaining forces in disarray. Julio tries Erdate, delivering a final tactical check in hopes of complicating matters, but his position can no longer hold together. Wesley ends with Nx8, calmly capturing the rook and sealing the result, completing a precise and dominant performance that leaves no doubt about his victory. The video ends here. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. Please don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thank you again, everyone. See you in the next video.